Right, in the Minnesota shooting, the officer's name has been released. His name is Geronimo, I guess it's Yanez. That doesn't sound Asian to me. That sounds like this guy is probably Hispanic. So, you know, the girlfriend who was given a description of the guy that said he was Asian, 5'5", 5'6", you know, she obviously was under emotional duress. But based on the name, we don't have any, you know, I haven't seen any pictures yet, but based on the name, it sounds like this guy was probably Hispanic. But they've released a statement, and they are obviously trying to present the only defense that they can. Here we go.
I want to take you to Minnesota, where the lawyer for one of the officers involved in the fatal shooting in Philando Castile case has just released a statement. And NBC's Blake McCoy is in St. Paul with more on what that statement said. Blake?
Alex, well, we know this officer has now been interviewed by investigators, by state investigators looking into this case. And this is the first time that we are hearing from the officer through his attorney. The officer's name is Geronimo Yanez. The statement reads, Officer Yanez is cooperating completely with law enforcement. He, of course, is deeply saddened for the family of Philando Castile and for his loved ones. This is a tragic incident brought about by the officer having to react to the actions taken by Mr. Castile. This case has nothing to do with race and everything to do with the presence of a gun. Again, it has nothing to do with race. It has everything to do with the presence of a gun. Now, a little backstory here. We know from the girlfriend who was in the car that at the time Castile was shot, he was reaching for his identification as the officer had requested. At that point, he told the officer, hey, I do have a weapon. I have a permit to carry the weapon. And that is apparently when the officer fired. The officer appears to be claiming that he believes that he was reaching for the gun, and that's why he opened fire. That statement you just heard does not go anywhere near as far as the girlfriend had been hoping for. Take a listen.
All right, I'm not going to go into the emotional part with the girlfriend, but the attorney's statement doesn't wash, in my opinion. Oh, and let me explain why. Either Mr. Castile never mentioned anything about a gun or a concealed carry permit, which we know that he has. And when the officer asked him to reach for his license and I guess proof of insurance, whatever, registration, that instead of reaching for his license and whatever other documentation requested, he instead pulled out a gun, which Yanez saw, in turn pulled out his gun unless it was already out and fired. The statement doesn't make sense. Now, based on the half-truth that he's telling and based on the girlfriend's statement, Mr. Castile informed the officer that he had a weapon in the car and that he had a concealed carry. He at that point started to go to his back pocket in order to produce the document that the officer requested. The officer panicked and told him to put his hands up. While putting his hands up, the officer fired. There's only two ways for that officer to know and react to the presence of a gun. One, he saw the gun, i.e., instead of Mr. Castile getting the information as requested, he instead pulled the gun, which makes no sense because he had no reason to pull a gun. There were no warrants, no nothing on him. Why would he pull a gun when he is in no jeopardy? Or, number two, Mr. Castile told the officer that he had a gun and a concealed carry The mention of the gun blocked everything else out, and any movement that Mr. Castile made is what triggered the firing of the weapon by the officer. And that squares much more with the girlfriend story, which indicated that Mr. Castile told the officer about the weapon and the concealed carry. The officer panicked and fired. Reacted to the presence of a gun. I guess the attorney's trying to pull something out of his ass because that's basically the only defense that they can put up, and it's not washing. Now, if somebody could come up with a third definition as to how he could react to the presence of the gun, either without seeing it or without being told about it, please let me know.